Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope this comes out a little clearer. Still got to get the camera out to the store tomorrow. Boker Tov, friends and family. Appreciate all the comments I got, all the feedback through various channels. I got accounts here and there. I'll try to post it. This is not like my primary thing. I'm involved in other day jobs and family. But definitely have a lot what to say. People always tell me, that I'd be really good at speaking off lots of ideas on Israel. So I'm hoping to do that. So today I just wanted to mention a couple minutes about some ideas, specifically in regards to kids these days. So I've got a bunch of kids. Hopefully you have a bunch of kids. If you're not married, you should be blessed with a wife, husband, or whatever, a spouse and children. Super important to be able to have children. But I heard some sad news that even here where I live in this one of these wonderful towns in Israel, that there's a 50% of grade 8 kids are not really doing so well spiritually, and most likely also in their academic studies. Question must be asked is, what's going on here? How do we get into these numbers of 50%? Well, I don't want to get into any big details now. I want to keep this one short. But I think that you really need to ask yourself, who is the leadership that's been leading us? Who are the ones who have been deciding what the curriculums are going to be? Who's the one leading our generation? I want to go back to actually the Gemara that we're learning now, if you're part of Daf Yomi, which is Gemara Sanhedrin. It says at the end of Gemara Sanhedrin, we're in the beginning now, in the Daf 20 something at these days, but in a few months we're going to eventually get to the end. And the end says some amazing stuff about the times of Mashiach, just before Mashiach. It's almost like prophetic, speaking about our generation from the wisest, the biggest chachamim of all time. So it gives people like me, a regular guy, it gives me a little leeway to speak about people, leaders, that otherwise, who am I to say anything? But anyways, it says that the Panei Hador, the face of the generation, is going to be the face of a dog. It's going to be like a kelev, like klavim, like dogs. And they say, what does it mean by dogs? It means that a dog runs ahead, like he's leading you, he's taking you somewhere, but really he stops and he looks behind him to see what's going on. Now, what that really means is that it's saying that in our generation, this is what Chazal, the greatest Rabbanim, since we lost the Beit HaMikdash, Hashem said, okay, there's going to be a dark period of 2,000 years. So I'm going to superinfuse superhero level wisdom and intelligence and answers I'm going to give to the next few generations, which was written down, and that's what we call Chazal. We're going to give them the super strong wisdom, and we're going to make sure that what they say is applicable to the end. So during those dark periods, there'll be something to grasp, to understand. So what we need to understand is there is a complete and utter failure of our leadership, of whatever you want to call leadership, which I don't consider myself a leader. And I know a lot of people who are incredible, but they maybe have a shul, a Beit Knesset, of 50 families, 20 families, 100 families. But we're being led by leaders who act like dogs in the way that they make it look like they're leading us with their wisdom, and that they've calculated what the decisions are and how the best way to give the next generation what they need, but they're completely failing because they're not really leading. They're looking at the people who kvetch the most, the people who complain and say, hey, you have to do this. Hey, you have to do that. Oh, the Vilna Gaon said this. Oh, well, there's a Rav from 80 years ago, and they said this. Or all the old rabbis who were 80 years old, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, said we have to do things like this, and all these things are not allowed. So what they were really doing is sometimes they were coming out from their own experiences. A lot of times what happens is that famous, well-known leaders, they have a few trusted people in their community that they feel like knows what's going on, and they listen to what they say, and then they go and they publicly will say, oh, well, we can't do this. For example, the smartphone thing. If you're not living in Israel, you should know that in Israel there's almost like a break in Judaism, in the different communities, unfortunately, which if you have a smartphone, it's as if you're considered like not Jewish, not keeping the Torah. And if you're one of the people who sacrifices everything that comes with a smartphone and ease of life and access to all the different services like your banking and whatever else you get from a smartphone, if you sacrifice all that to have a dumb phone, then you're like a holy person. You're doing the right thing. And it's caused a super friction to the point where people now look at you if you're on a bus and you have a smartphone. I have a smartphone, like most people. Like, I work in tech, and it would be a huge damage for me to not have a smartphone. But you get looks, and there's people who they dress like they're, living 100 years ago, dressed in old school Jewish garments. And, big payas, big beards, or without payas and without beards, but they're very strict. And they look at you as like, oh, this guy's not this guy. It's like you give somebody a piece of food and you're doubting if the food's kosher. Maybe they threw in a piece of bacon. No, there's no bacon over here. There's no bacon, but I have my own brain and logic, and I said, look, there's technology. Technology has its benefits. It also has stuff you have to be worried about. But what happens with kids? Kids aren't stupid. They know what's going on. They want access to the fun. But when the leadership is not leading, but instead actually following, you have what we have today, which is 50% of grade 8 kids coming out of major institutions are just not interested. They don't want to buy what you're selling. If they don't want to buy what you're selling, then they're not the problem, you're the problem. And I'm not the problem here specifically, and probably anyone who's watching this is not particularly the problem. And the people who are problematic, the leaders who are not leading, but who, like Chazal said, are acting like a dog, where they're pretending they're leading, but they're really just listening to the loudest voices who are complaining behind them the most. If instead they led, they would realize that you have to give the generation what they need, which is the tools to be able to live a balanced and healthy life in the future. And that's the entire point of my lesson over here today. Lesson point that I want to get across is that we're seeing now that there's been a failure of leadership. We need true leadership to stand up, and there are those individuals out there that are leading well. What I suggest is everyone to take a look around and find, where do you see Jewish leadership, or even generalized leadership, that is actually leading, that's actually taking a look at all the facts, has the brain power, putting things together, and is making changes and adjustments that actually benefits the people. Where do you see grade 8 kids or older that are doing amazingly spiritually, amazing physically in their studies? You're going to find balanced places that factor in as much as they can and actually lead, and don't act like dogs running ahead, showing off how much they're leading. Well, really, they look back quite often to make sure that they're following the ones behind them. I challenge you to try to be a leader. I challenge myself to try to be a leader, and I ask that Hashem should bless us with the intelligence and the wisdom to differentiate between good and bad, and to know how to walk the fine way of life today. If you work in chinuch and education, I'd love to hear from you, because we're in touch with some people that are putting together some programs, hopefully, that will help the younger generation to be able to get the tools they need to be successful in life, both spiritually, both physically, that they should give lots of happiness to Hashem, and as well give lots of happiness to their parents and to their community. Doesn't that sound great? Sounds great to me. Anyways, guys, have an amazing day. It's time for me to get into my day. Have an amazing one. And enjoy the view, once again, of our beautiful town.